And that's actually a good segue to our next question, which is for you, Ira, just about what borrowers are looking for in terms of loans. Do you see them looking more at the CMBS market? Are they looking at other options?
I think that for most borrowers, the CMBS option is a last resort.
Okay.
If they had a choice. So if they have a comparable option to borrow from a savings bank or a CMBS, they're going with the bank any day of the week. The reality is, though, that if you want to take a loan non-recourse on a retail center, very few banks, if any, are still doing it, and definitely not full leverage. If you want to take 10-year paper, banks are reluctant today to do 10-year paper with all anticipation of rates moving up. So that's where it breaks down. We're finding, though, that as you go larger loans, start breaking 20, 25 million, banks aren't even an option at all, because it's the universe of lenders in any size become a problem. So it's a last resort, but it probably has the highest market share of shopping centers, financing today.
Why is there hesitancy to the CMBS side of things? Obviously, if you have a distressed property, then it's difficult to work out. There's no question. It's a very cumbersome process. Special services and CMBS trusts are under tremendous restrictions as to what they can or cannot do, and there are many pieces pulling in different directions. But if you're not planning on being in distress, which I'm assuming most borrowers going in are not, why is there the general hesitancy to get in? I mean, is there any, is just a thought, or is there actually some reasons articulated?
I think that the biggest underlying reason is that everyone along the process is looking to cover themselves, and they're not empowered to make decisions. They can only lose by a decision that they make. So in an all perfect scenario, there's no problem. Some tenant comes to a landlord and says, I have my lease here. I have an option. I'm paying you now $22 a foot. I have an option to move, and I could leave the lease. And you could rent it out for a new tenant and bring in $35 a foot for the market. It's great for the owner. Every bank would say, do the deal. I'd rather that new tenant there. Over here, there's no one empowered. Why should someone say yes? If it goes great, they don't get a thank you. And if there's a problem, they get sued. So that's what the problem is. There's no empowerment on the front end.
Yeah, I think the issue really is with CMBS, and you have to go back to how CMBS was created, and because of the tax treatment as a REMIC structure, it's got to be a static pool. One thing I would challenge a little bit is, and I think this is a myth that quite frankly has been promulgated by a lot of the special servicers, is we're not that constrained by what we can do in terms of a workout. I can mod a loan, I can extend a loan, I can foreclose on a loan, I can sell the note, I can take it back, and I can put as REO, I can put money into it, lease it up, I can sell it. There's a lot of things. There's certain things we're not going to be able to do, and there's certain things that are not REMIC eligible that certainly we will avoid doing so as to not make the trust a taxable vehicle. I think the problem occurs more. I mean, look, once a borrower goes into default, he has issues with his lender anyway, and he's never going to necessarily agree, and unless the lender just rolls over and gives him what he wants, which doesn't usually happen. I think the problem is in the context of a performing loan situation. To Ira's point, where you've got a lease, you're looking for a lease approval. And the problem with the document, when you ask a master servicer to do something, if it's not expressly detailed in the document where they can say, yes, it fits the document, and they can cite the provision in the loan documents and say, we can approve that. If you're coloring outside the lines at all, it becomes a very difficult proposition for them to say yes. And I think there, is where some of the borrowers, particularly some of the larger borrowers, are a little averse just because of the lack of flexibility that you might have with a balance sheet lender, insurance company, or bank.
So where's the myth then? The reality is there's outside the
No,
box.
I think the myth is around the special servicers, are very dogmatic, and all they can do is you either pay or we foreclose.
I don't think so. They know you can talk, but I think we're finding that you could talk to them, but either it's a little out of the box. Even if it's not, if you made a bad call, if you made a good call, it saved the center, you get nothing for it. If you made a bad call in hindsight, you're sued for it. So, like an appraiser, why should an appraiser push the envelope? If it goes great, then no one's thanking them. If there's a problem, how did you appraise the building this high? So they also live on with a certain level.
But clearly appraisers haven't gotten that memo because
by the way, appraisers didn't get the memo but that's what's changing now with the banks now is that they got the memo because the banker or the broker could pick or veto certain appraisers. With the newest systems they're putting into place, that memo is coming a lot stronger, and because they're answering to the head of credit at the bank, they're not answering someone at a lower level.
But
You'll
Ira,
find
listen,
that trend.
but that's the problem. Because the guy originating the loan is the guy pushing the appraiser. So let's flip the other side. So when the same appraiser goes tomorrow to property that's 2 blocks away and has to appraise that property, he's just going to remember about how aggressive he had to be in order to originate that loan, in order to save face. And that's the issue as well. I think what Kevin's saying with regards to the myth is that many special service asset managers in negotiating with a borrower will say, well, that's outside our jurisdiction. We can't do this, that, the next, and the other from a negotiation perspective, and it sort of creates a brick wall that can't be countered, when in reality, special servicers, for the most part, can do what they can do within a set box, but a larger box than what's thought out there can do many things to actually restructure if that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back to what a lot of special servicers did in, say, 2009, 10, even into 11, there were a lot of creative, in hindsight, people may look back and say, you know, misguided modifications, but there were a lot of creative structures done simply because the special servicing community was addressing the market conditions at the time, and there was a lack of liquidity both from a debt and equity perspective, so the options were not very good. We sold loans out of receivership where the receiver had the ability to sell. We sold them, got in a new sponsor, got in new capital, restructured the loan, had them assume, and then we would restructure that loan because it was a better bid than we were going to get if we took the note to market to sell, or we subsequently foreclosed and tried to sell the REO. I think the difference today is simply because there is a lot more liquidity in the market and prices have been moving and cap rates have been compressing, that if the borrower is not bringing something of tangible value to the table in that discussion with the special servicer is more inclined today to simply take the asset back and execute on it, you know, on behalf of the trust. So.